Are you ready to boost your confidence when selling so you're able to close more deals? Nikki Roush will show you how to build a foundation of skills and a mindset that creates sales success without feeling pushy or salesy and without fear of rejection. She is a sales strategist and coach with more than 25 years of sales experience and is master certified in neuro-linguistic programming. This is a radically different approach to selling. It's a no sleaze, no slime, and no stress approach to building your business. This is Sales Maven. Here's Nikki.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Sales Maven Show. I'm your host, Nikki Roush. I'm your own personal sales maven, here to offer you tips, techniques, and strategies to master your sales conversations. Today's episode is an on-air coaching call with one of our very own Sales Maven Society members. Today with us is Crispin Spaeth. Welcome to the show, friend.
Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to have you here. Share with the audience a little bit about you and your business and who you serve.
Yeah, I am a movement and performance coach, and I teach something called the Integrative Alexander Technique, which is a way to access your natural coordination so you can move, think, and communicate in ways that please you and serve your goals and your mission. And I work with all kinds of different people, including professionals who are professionals, entrepreneurs, small business people who are looking to get their ideas out into the world in a way that suits them.
Okay. So give me an example of like an ideal client and what they would come to you. Like what would be a struggle that they might be having or a challenge and they would come to you to learn about the Alexander Technique?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Alexander Technique, Integrative Alexander Technique.
Integrative, thank you.
Yeah. So a good example is the founder of a startup business. Well, it was a pivot business, and I'll keep it anonymous, but she was moving from delivering services in one form to another, and she was looking for investors, and she didn't have a lot of experience pitching to investors. So my job in that scenario is not to really deal with the content because I'm not, I do pitch prep performance stuff, right? So if people are nervous or unsure or working with new audiences or new technologies and new performance venues, I work with them to work on their kind of whole self, physical thinking, performance self, so that they can adapt to all those different situations.
Okay. So if somebody is, for instance, deciding, I know that one of the ways I could build my business is by speaking, but the idea of getting up in front of a group feels uncomfortable. For instance, I never know what to do with my hands, or, am I moving my hands too much? Or should I stand with them, my arms by my side? Are those the types of challenges potentially somebody could come work with you and you're going to teach them a little bit about movement and how to have more impact through movement?
Yes, absolutely. And the first thing I would say is, let's not worry about your hands for now.
Okay.
And then I would teach them about this overall coordination business that I'm in. And probably their hands wouldn't move around so much after that, unless they choose to use it for expression.
Yeah.
So sometimes when people get wiggly or fidgety, it's because they have a lot of energy for what they're doing. And they might be holding it in not in weird ways, but they might be trying to hold it in. But that's not how we work, right? We want to express ourselves. So kind of letting that energy distribute through your whole system means that your hands don't have to wiggle around.
And would somebody also come to you if they're doing a lot of virtual stuff and they're thinking about the energy that's kind of happening in their body? And is that coming across on camera the way they want it to or not, or those types of things?
Yes. And I have been teaching over Zoom for the past 2 years, and it's been such an amazing opportunity and learning experience, because the way that I teach, when I teach in person, I use my hands through touch on people. But the process is really for you, right? The process is really for the client. So over Zoom, I've really needed to get people to tell me what's happening for them and with them. And that really helps them learn how to use it for themselves. So noticing what's happening in you helps you decide what you want to do about it. And also there are certain, technological issues around Zoom. Like, for instance, the pixels are wiggly. We're not used to looking at wiggly pixels. So it has a different effect on our brain. So we just talk through the kind of technical stuff too.
I love that. Okay. And so how do people typically hire you? Is it a one and done session, or is it multiple sessions over a period of time? How are you working with clients?
I have a few different ways of working with people. I do one-on-one sessions that for people doing public speaking, it's usually best to do that over a series of 4 to 10 lessons. Or if they're working toward a particular show, we can kind of back up and help them with rehearsals for that. And then I also do group classes. So I do public group classes and custom group classes.
And what are the topics that you're teaching in the custom group or the classes? What are some of the topics?
There's sort of a general approach of just Integrative Alexander Technique. So we go through the kind of foundational concepts and strategies there. I also do some topical things, like I co-teach a writing course called Moving Words with a writer.
Ooh, I love that name, Moving Words.
Yeah, it's a really fun course. So we're doing one of those. I'll not be too time specific. We offer them occasionally throughout the year.
Yeah.
And then I also have started to do one-off embodied presentation coaching classes and workshops for larger business groups.
Nice. Okay. Now, I don't know if you actually said this, but I'm going to ask you, just in case, now that somebody's hearing, because if you've never heard this term, which I hadn't until you and I started working together, Integrative Alexander Technique, how would you describe that to somebody in 2 or 3 sentences?
This is an ongoing challenge. I'll give it a go. And
you didn't know I was going to put you on the spot.
No. That's why I'm here, right?
Yeah.
So Integrative Alexander Technique is, I always say this, a way to access your natural coordination that relies on the head-spine relationship as its foundational mechanism. So when I work with people, I'm working with, yes, their physical self, but also the effect that relationship has on our whole system.
Okay.
That was kind of a deep dive. That would be like,
I like
if you
that.
asked me the second time, but you kind of asked me the second time.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful. At least it paints a picture for me. And I also I'm lucky in that I have watched your member-to-member training that you did for us for the Sales Maven Society. So once a year, people who are in the group have an opportunity to put up a member-to-member training, which actually lives in the training center. And you did a training, well, first of all, on camera, and I know I've shared this with you, your presence on camera is so stunning. You have such a presence on camera. And I was just so impressed. And what you taught us about extension was really impactful. And I think about that. I've thought about your training multiple times since I've watched it, which now has been a couple months ago. And it was just so good. So if you are a listener and you're thinking, I'm curious, I'd like to know more about this, definitely connect with Crispin because she's the real deal. And you have such a presence. I feel like it's like you really walk your talk in what you're teaching, and it comes across in the way you show up in your trainings and even how you show up in the Sales Maven Society too. So, all right.
I'm smiling. Listeners, I'm smiling. Thank you.
Well, this is an on-air coaching call for you, friend. So how can I serve you today? What would support look like for you right now?
So one of my ongoing challenges is that in my marketing, I always want to be walking my talk. I always want to be teaching the way, teaching through, not teaching through my marketing, but certainly not damaging my teaching through my marketing. And so there are some words I don't use. And in general, there are any words that would cause disconnection or pain. Like, I don't want to sell pain. But I know that my approach means that sometimes it can be hard for people to recognize themselves if they are having a challenge or a discomfort that I could help them with.
Will you give me an example of some of the words that you're like, I will not use this in my marketing?
I don't use posture. I don't use the word posture.
Okay.
I don't use pain. I don't use body image. I don't use mindfulness. So this is not so much pain, but about the disconnection. I don't use stage fright. So here I am in public using these words, and it kind of feels liberating to be like, oh, you're the words I don't use.
I kind of put you on the spot there. You might not have wanted to even say those on air. So thank you for doing it. And if you want me to cut this out, I can.
No.
Okay.
I think it's helpful. I think it's instructive. Like you and I have talked before about, what is that you said about, don't try to sell me thing after somebody cut you. You just cut me. I don't want to buy from you now.
I always
like
say,
if someone uses pain.
Yes. It's the person who walks up to you, gives you 20 paper cuts and says, oh, bless your heart, darling, you're bleeding. I sell Band-Aids. I cannot stand that approach to sales. And I think, and I know I've talked about this on the podcast too, so this might not be new to listeners, but this idea of you've got to hit people's pain points. You have to like really hammer home on pain points as being the only way to effectively attract your ideal clients. It feels like, frankly, icky to me. It's like so gross that has to be the approach. Now, with that though, here's what I will say. And I don't know if we've talked about this on the podcast, but this is what I'm going to say for you, Crispin. When you're thinking about your marketing, you want to think about motivational traits. And this work comes from my background in neurolinguistic programming. There's something called language and behavioral profiles. And there's a great book out there, and it was written years ago by Shelley Rose Charvet, and it's called Words That Change Minds. And this is what I love about NLP, but she took one little piece of NLP, which was language and behavioral profiles, and she built this huge business around it. And in there, in the language and behavioral profiles, there's this idea of, are people motivated towards something or away from something? Okay. So we don't always know where people are, and it's on a spectrum. So some people might be like more towards, but they like a little away from language, whereas somebody else is like, I'm strictly away from language. And what I mean by that, it's the objective of, well, I think the most common one that you hear is the carrot or the stick. Have you ever heard people talk about the carrot or the stick? Are you rewarding people with something, or are you beating them? Which I hate this reference to, carrot and stick. So I'm just bringing it into the room just because it's a common term. But the way that I learned about it had to do with, what will people run faster to do? And each person will be individual. Some people will run their apps out like their absolute fastest. They'll give it everything they've got to win a gold medal. Whereas other people aren't as motivated by winning a gold medal as they would run their absolute fastest to get away from a German shepherd that was chasing them. So that's towards and away from. And when you're thinking about your marketing, I love that you have very clear words that you won't use in your promotion of who you are and what you do. And because we don't know what people's motivational traits are, I think it's important that you do some type of balance in your work and in your marketing and in everything that you're talking about, even when you're in a live conversation with somebody. Although when you're in a live conversation with people, you'll start to hear their motivational trait, because they'll talk about what they don't want. Like, I don't want to get up in front of an investor and, have all this extra energy and not know what to do. Okay. That's an away from message they're giving you. So when you're thinking about putting out content and attracting your ideal clients, you might want to use an away from strategy. Like I always say, a lot of times when I'm writing copy, I'll say, this class is for you when, and then I'll have, and just so you know, I'm a heavily toward type person. I like toward statements. I like recognition. I like money. I like to win. It's like all these things that I like. And if you only do away from strategies in your marketing to me, I probably won't resonate with your message. So when I'm doing mine, I try to find a balance. So if I'm going to do 5 bullet points, I'll usually have 3 that are toward type statements and 2 away from type statements. So for instance, give me what would be a statement that somebody is looking like, what's a benefit that somebody would absolutely want to have as the result of working with you?
Renewed confidence.
Renewed confidence. So that's a toward. That's definitely a toward. Renewed confidence. Now, an away, like you could, not that you're going to use the same one, but if we wanted to make an away from strategy from that, is no longer struggle with your confidence level. That's an away from strategy. So this is not selling pain. This is just trying to reach people's motivational trait. Now you tell me though, does that feel like pain?
Yeah.
It does. Okay.
The struggle part is, yeah.
Okay. So you might have to find a little bit more of a balance. Like if you've decided, if you're committed to this and saying, I'm really going to make all of my strategies, my marketing, my sales, everything's going to be towards type statements, that's totally fine. And you will lose the opportunity to attract some of the people that will benefit from your work. And that's okay. But it's finding that balance. So let me think of can you think of another toward type statement that you would use?
Well, maybe I could start with the pain part.
Okay. What's the pain part?
And actually address pain. So
yeah.
I might have to talk it out a little bit.
That's okay. Go ahead. That's what it's for.
Physical. So I have used the term physical patterns or patterns that are no longer serving you, like
Yes.
let go of patterns that are no longer serving you, which kind of feels like both, right? Because you have the pattern, but also the freedom from the pattern.
So letting go is it kind of does. It's one of those that could be considered a toward and also an away from, and that will happen from time to time. So that might be your answer, frankly, for you when you know, I absolutely do not want to sell pain. Can you look for some of these statements that could be interpreted as away from or as towards? That actually just may be your answer. And then, of course, the towards things will come easier to you because you know that that's, this idea of renewed confidence or this idea of, I'm trying to, I don't want to insert words for you. So help me with a few
freedom
more.
of movement, mental clarity.
Yes. So that's a toward. Those
easier
are towards.
Access to creativity.
Definitely a towards. And you can even sometimes put a toward and away in a sentence. It's going to be a little bit longer. So move towards creativity and stop the negative self-talk, for instance. That is a toward and away from in one statement. Now, it might be too much, but just so you get an idea of that. Or letting go of judgment to access your most creative side is
Nikki, that's so good.
Okay, thank you. I love those moments where somebody resonates with something I say. Okay, so that is an away from that I've just turned into a toward type statement. And it's really, I would say with this, get playful. So don't try to be perfect. Just get playful with it. And then when you say, oh, that statement feels too away from for me, or that feels too pain point for me, then let go of that one. Like just set it aside or ask yourself, how could I turn it into a towards statement? Because sometimes it is, as much as I do think it is important to identify what are the struggles, what are the challenges, that people are facing. You do need to know that. It doesn't mean that you have to, again, give them a bunch of paper cuts and then say, bless your heart, you're bleeding. So you don't need to bring it into every conversation, but you do have to work some of that into your marketing, because if everything is Pollyanna, everything is bright, shiny, perfect, people won't believe that either. Right. It's like I don't know how you feel about this, but I see a lot of people out there going like, I'm going to show you how to, make $1 million in 3 days with my new challenge. That's, pay me $27 and learn how to make $3 million. It's you're like, that seems a little far-fetched. So, stay in integrity always, which I know you have a high level of integrity. So I'm not worried about that for you, but stand in your place of integrity and be willing to see how you can put a little bit away from and then move it toward, and see if that helps attract more of your ideal clients. And like I said, for me, a lot of times, if you read through my bullet points, you'll see 3 of them will be towards statements and 2 will be away from. I have to really work to come up with my away from statements because they don't come naturally to me. I have to listen to what my clients say as what are their away from strategies. What do they want to let go of? What do they want to release? What do they no longer want to, judge themselves about? And what do they no longer want to feel bad about? Because my brain is always searching for the toward. Like, what's the result? What's gonna improve in your life? But there's a question in NLP that we learned years ago when we used to do these processes, like a full outcome. It was an outcome statement. It's a process that you have to learn when you study NLP, and walking somebody through like an outcome process is a really big deal. As a matter of fact, in order to get my practitioner certification, we had to bring somebody from the outside into the room. We didn't get to work with the person we brought. We had to work with somebody we didn't know and walk through the outcome. Yes, that's how you passed the class. Like, that's how you got your certification. And it's quite a process. Like, there's a lot of questions in there and you're doing a lot of work, really the client's doing the work, but you're guiding through this. And there's a great question in an outcome statement or an outcome process. And it's, what's stopping you from already having this? And a lot of times people don't think about it until they're asked that question. What's stopping you from already having achieved your outcome? Or what's stopping you from already feeling confident about, standing in front of investors? If you don't identify that or help them identify it for themselves. So I'm not going to tell them, you're bleeding, you've got a bunch of paper cuts I just gave you. I'm going to ask them, what's stopping you? And if they say, I keep giving myself paper cuts over and over and over again, well, I need to know that information, right? As a coach, to help them move to whatever, move into a more, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Something that's a more freeing experience for them. They have to be able to identify it in order to let go of it. So when you think about what's stopping people from achieving their outcome, that might help you come up with some away from statements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is, I think, why I love your work so much, is that NLP and Alexander Technique are kind of have similar sort of like removing obstacles.
Yeah.
And noticing in what I would call interference, what you might call, what's stopping you, just noticing the places where people's history or the way they talk to themselves might be getting in their way.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about this a lot in NLP, or at least we did in the courses that I took, was this idea that a lot of times what stops people is one of 3 things. They feel helpless, hopeless, or worthless about a specific topic. So it's context specific. So it's not like they're hopeless in all areas of their life or they feel worthless in all areas, but it's one of those 3 things, but they don't think of it in those terms. And so helping their brain supply them with the answer of what's really getting in the way, a lot of times just by helping somebody identify what is getting in their way. And then they can look at it and go, well, that's not true. I'm not hopeless. I'm not helpless. I'm not worthless. Of course, that's not true. But they don't even know sometimes that that's the thing that's kind of a block. And frankly, it's hard to do this for yourself. It's hard to figure out these things for yourself. This is why I think I do the work that I do and you do some of the work that you do, of being able to guide people, because it's not about me having the answer. I don't know if you feel this in your work, but it's not about necessarily me having the answer. It's more about helping you uncover and access the information that you already know or have, and then maybe offer you some techniques or some strategies to move in the direction that you want. But I'll never tell anybody what's wrong with them, what their problem is. Like, that's something for them to identify, whether they think something's wrong or they think there's a problem. We got to identify what it is in order to move through it. I'm kind of off on a tangent.
No, you're not. You're
okay.
Speaking right to me, Nikki.
Okay. So when you think about this pain, this idea of like, I'm not going to sell pain, does this idea of towards in a way, does that offer you a little bit more freedom?
It does. In my work, I talk about, instead of positive and negative, I talk about constructive and not constructive.
Yeah.
And if I can just apply that to my messaging, it might be a gentler way for me to get to the information. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, when you think about messaging, the idea is it's not giving the solution, right? The messaging is to attract, to spark something in somebody that goes, Crispin knows something that I want to know, or Crispin can guide me in some way that's going to allow me, to X, Y, and Z in my life or in my business. So that's the whole idea behind putting, information out there and putting marketing materials out there and putting sales copy out there, is to just help people self-identify. Versus, I do think there is this other approach where, and I see this a lot in sales, where it's like, you've got to hammer home, like, somebody says, I don't think this is the right thing for me. And you've got to push them and go, well, then you obviously are not ready to really change your life. Like, that to me is like selling pain. And that feels really manipulative and gross. Like, I hate that approach.
I agree.
Anybody that does that to me, I'm like, oh boy, now you not only have lost my business, but you've lost my respect. Like, I just am so anti that. And I know that is still, that's not what you're doing. And we want to attract your ideal client. We got to make it so easy for them to say, I'm in, Crispin, I need you.
I think it's a sweetness, like to I'm starting to think like it would be kind of me to say, like, I'm kind of weird. I'm kind of an oddball, to say, hey, oddball, this thing is going to help you champion your fantastically weird and amazing self in the world, so that you're more comfortable wherever you go.
Yes.
So I think I can lean into that.
Yeah. I love that too, especially people who do identify as like the oddball. Like, we want to work with people who get us, right? Like, I want to give my money to people who get me and will allow for me to be me. If I have to show up and put on, some kind of a facade, that's not going to go well. One, because I don't think I'm that good of an actress. I can never really fake my way through that stuff. So we want people who are like, oh, I get you. So for you to put out there like, hey, I'm an oddball. And if you feel like an oddball too, I can teach you or show you some of the things I've learned to really enhance who I am, so you can enhance who you are and show up as your full authentic self and make it really easy for investors to say yes, or whatever it is that they're wanting to do. Yeah. I think when you speak to the people, and were you on the training yesterday? So in the Sales Maven Society, I hired Carol Cox to come in and do a training for the group. And she was talking at the kind of towards the end of her training. It was so good. by the way, if you're not in the Sales Maven Society and you want to access this training, come join us because it's recorded and it's now in the training in the training center for people to go back and rewatch. But Carol was talking about how to integrate your own story into your speaking and the importance of it. And she was talking about vulnerability. And she had shared, she shared one of her own personal stories where, and I know she shared this on her podcast, so I'm not revealing anything that's private, but she had talked about a speaking opportunity that she, by her definition, she had totally bombed, I think was her word. And there is something about that to me makes her even more compelling. I don't know if you felt that way about Carol yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, I felt really sad for her that it was kind of threw her off so far off course. And I was like, I really wish I could have helped her. In my own selfish things, I was like, oh no, overly excited nervous system. I can help you train for that.
So you don't get in these situations. That's a perfect example. But this idea that, when you can just be you, that is going to help you attract your people, right? Like one of the best and funniest compliments that I sometimes get is people will show up on a strategy session with me and they'll be like, you're just like you are on your podcast. Yeah. If I wasn't, that would feel so off, right? If you got onto a strategy session with me and you're like, this doesn't sound like Nikki on the podcast at all. Like she's so different. That would be, to me, so off-putting to the poor person who just invested money. Like you should know what you're going to get. So for you, I just say, continue to embrace. If you identify it as oddball, continue to embrace that of you and who you are. And it gives permission for everybody else, because your version of oddball, somebody else may have a very different definition of what oddball is, but it still gives them permission to be that.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki.
You're welcome. All right. So something for you to play with. And of course, that as you're writing these up, if you want to post these in the group, and I'm happy to give you some feedback as you're working through some of this stuff. And as we wrap up today, I always like to end with 2 questions. So my first question for you is, would you be willing to share with the listener, what's one benefit you've received from being in the Sales Maven Society?
I'm not sure I can limit it to one, so I'm going to give you 2. One of them is your responsiveness in the Facebook group when I'm like, in the middle of sending an email, and I won't commit you to immediate turnaround time, but when I'm like in the middle of sending an email and I think, can I wait a day to send this email? Because I'm not really sure I have the language right. And then I post the email in the group and you give me a response. And then the next day I'm able to send out an email. I feel really confident about that. Feels like, oh yes, I'm making it more possible for someone to work with me. But then the second thing, so I'm currently doing the storytelling for business. And I just had a real, I would call it an aha moment where we were doing the exercise where we translated accomplishments into a more conversational statement. And I realized just because the Integrative Alexander Technique is so weird, and I've had kind of not a meandering career, but a complex career, in lots of different fields that have made me the qualified person that I am. But I also sometimes feel a little defensive about it, like I just did, like, oh, I have to qualify that I'm, that I'm qualified. So just being able to take my actual qualifications and say, here it is, this is real. And this is what makes it, this is where I provide value in the services I provide right now. So that was a really, really great moment.
I'm so glad. That makes my heart happy. So Crispin's referring to the masterclass that I'm teaching right now. I teach it usually once a year, once every 2 years, which is storytelling for business. So I'm so happy to have you in there. And it's nice to hear that was your big aha, because being able to take from, just talking in bullet points to actually bringing a story to life with a sentence. Makes me so happy. I'm excited for you. All right. Now, my other question for you is, people are listening and they're probably thinking, I want to know more about Crispin and I want to know more about working with her. So how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Well, probably I made a video specifically for your listeners today.
You did?
So yeah, it's a little video. And it's 4 easy things you can do to feel better on Zoom calls and make better connections. So it's a little tiny training, about 4 minutes long. And that will be available at crispinspaeth.com, whack Maven.
Perfect.
So people can get that there. My name is impossible to spell, so I will just ask that you look at the information on Nikki's podcast. You can also find me on LinkedIn under my name, linkedin.com, Crispin Spaeth.
I'm still going to spell it anyway. She spells her name Crispin. That's Crispin. Spaeth is spelled Spaeth. So go and get that training. You'll be so happy that you spent this time learning and watching this training. And if it's 4 minutes and you're giving them 4 techniques, I'm going to go watch it, but we will put it in the show notes too. So if you didn't quite get it, it'll be in the show notes. You can look on your, whatever app you're listening on, and it'll be there. So go connect with Crispin. Thank you so much for doing that for my audience. I feel really honored that you did that for us.
I'm so grateful you invited me. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. All right. So as we wrap up today, if you're not yet a part of the Sales Maven Society, come join us. Come hang out with us. There's some really cool people in there, as hopefully you've been hearing on the podcast. Crispin's in there, and she is so great at offering advice and solutions for people and participating in the group. It's a really fantastic group. You can join right now by going to salesmavensociety.com. And if you put in this this coupon code, it's going to save you on your first month of the group coaching program. So the coupon code is 47trial. That's the number 4, the number 7, TRIAL. It'll take $100 off your first month. Come hang out with us and see what's available. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being here, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for listening to Sales Maven. Visit us online at yoursalesmaven.com/maven for more resources to boost your confidence and skills.